Are you in need of a simple storage solution in your shop for small parts and hardware, or maybe even small hand tools with accessories? Well, check out this unit I recently built. It was easy, quick, and it's a great solution for small hand tools and hardware and accessories. If you'd like to make one for your own shop, stick around, I'll show you how I did it. So I purchased these individual trays from Harbor Freight some time back, and I wanted to go ahead and build a small cabinet for them. So here I'm taking some general dimensions of the trays and drawing out a sketch. I like to draw out a sketch of a project ahead of time so I can visualize on paper exactly what it is that I want to build. So just verifying all of my dimensions are correct and all of my measurements are as they should be. So I had some scrap cherry that I want to utilize to apply to the edging of some plywood. This project is going to utilize some plywood that I had left over from the toy storage cabinet. Originally I was going to make these strips a little bit thicker, but decided it really was unnecessary, so I just ended up cutting them down to about 3/8 of an inch in thickness. And I'm taking off my crosscut blade and going to install a ripping blade, and I'm ripping these taller strips down to about the same thickness, and these will be used for the top and bottom panels for the cabinet, so it'll have a little bit taller trim. So just verifying the thicknesses of all of the trims kind of match up, and just reflecting back on my sketch, making sure that all of these pieces are going to work for me. Then it's back to the table saw and putting the crosscut blade back in place and using my crosscut sled with a stop block. Now it's time to cut the panels down. So I've got 2 side panels and 2 top panels to cut. And I'm using some blue painter's tape to prevent some tear out on the veneer on these panels. So I'm not getting these to final dimensions, but just getting them in the ballpark at this point. So I'm going to be using some hardboard for the dividers, and here I'm setting up a dado stack that'll give me a slot that's just slightly larger than the thickness of the hardboard, and laying out exactly where the slots need to be cut. And then I begin to cut each of the dados into both side panels. I cut one and then cut the other before removing the fence. And I cut 3 of the dados before turning the panel around and cutting the remaining 2 from the other end. This just prevents the panel getting away from you on the table saw. It's a little bit safer method. So now, using a tip that I provided in a previous shop tip, I'll leave a link on the video here, I'm applying the edging to the 2 side panels. Now, even though this is shop furniture, I like my shop furniture to be eye appealing, and so since I have these scraps and these pieces of plywood, decided to make it look nice. So here I'm just gluing and clamping on the edging to these 2 panels and setting them aside, and turning my attention to the top and the bottom. Now I mentioned that I wanted the trim to be a little bit taller, and that'll just set this piece off a little bit from just a general plywood unit. So just clamping those in place. Now I'll have to come back later and cut each of these 2 down to their final dimensions, so that's why the trim doesn't actually span the entire width of these panels. And of course I was watching the glue dry at this point and thinking about what to do next. Sometimes I push myself and I want to fill every moment of my time in the shop, but sometimes you just have to take a little break. So it's back to the table saw, and of course removing the dado stack and putting my crosscut back into place so that I can begin cutting the hardboard. So as I mentioned, I'm using this hardboard. It's about 3/16 inches in thickness, and I'm going to cut one long strip and then cut each of the dividers down from that one strip. So I set my fence to the width that I need, and I cut my 5 dividers. Now I only have 5 of these trays, but I plan to go back and purchase another one. So I wanted to make this cabinet capable of holding 6 of these trays. And when you reach in to grab the tray, I want to make sure that there's no hindrance. So I decided to cut a little handhold notch out of the front. It gave me a chance to use my new bandsaw. Now I realize this is a much smaller project than I need to use this bandsaw, but my 14-inch bandsaw was a little bit inaccessible. So now I'm taking the tape off from the panels and just want to mate the dividers up to the panels to determine exactly where I need to cut them down to their final depth for the stop. Now I want the front of these trays to kind of be flush with the front of this cabinet, but I don't want the back panel to have any wiggle room. I want it to be a stop for these panels. So I cut these individual dividers down to their final width, and then I turn and cut the back panel. Now it'll also rest in a dado in the side panels. So here I'm putting a single dado blade in table saw so that I can cut the slot for that back panel to rest in. Just verifying exactly where that slot needs to be cut, and then I'm able to cut it into both side panels. I'm really enjoying doing these shop organization projects. The shop has been kind of in a state of disarray since we moved in, and I really am the type of person that likes for things to be in their home. So this type of project is right up my alley. It helps to get some of these things off of my workbench or off of my assembly table. So here I'm cutting the side panels down to their what ultimately will be their final height. Just making sure everything matches, and based on where that back panel is, I'm measuring for what will be the French cleat that will hold this panel on the wall. I want it to be recessed so that the panel or the cabinet mounts flushly to the wall. So I left about 3/4 of an inch back behind that panel, just enough depth to add that French cleat. So now it's back to the assembly table and turn my attention to the top and the bottom panels for the cabinet. So here I'm cutting them down to their final width now that the glue is dry on the trim, and I want to do a sort of a dry assembly, but first I need to focus on joinery. So just like with the toy storage cabinet, I want to use the Domino to join this little cabinet. It's kind of quickly becoming my favorite joinery method. But here I'm inserting the individual panels, and it was a little bit tricky because the trim doesn't allow them to just slide in. I've got to put them in one at a time and sort of work these two sides together. So just clamping it up so that I can cut the French cleat for the back, and setting it on a Lazy Susan so I can access all sides. So here I test fit all of the trays, make sure everything works as planned, and there's my French cleat that will get glued into place. So everything looks good. Now I start taking this thing apart and start laying it out for the joinery. So as I mentioned, I'm really enjoying using the Domino. My only issue has been placement of the dominoes and ensuring that you reference from the same face every time when you're building a project such as this. I've found that occasionally, if I'm not careful, I'll end up drilling the mortises referenced from the wrong face, and then find that things don't go together quite like they're designed to. So as long as you take your time, this can be a very useful tool for joining projects such as this one. So now that I've got all of my mortises cut, it's time to turn to the favorite part of the project, which is the sanding. Now I cut the trim down to just slightly proud of the thickness of this plywood that I'm using, so that I can sand it down to a nice flush finish. I think I mentioned that this plywood was some leftover scraps from the toy storage cabinet. It's a nice birch veneer plywood that looks really nice when you put a couple of coats of poly on. Now, I'm using the same finish that I used on the toy storage units. It's a Minwax product, and it's an oil modified water-based polyurethane. So I'd never used it before, and I bought a gallon of it because those cabinets were well, I built 4 of them, and I've really been pleased with how this product performs. It's very easy to go on. It dries very quickly. You can put multiple coats, sanding in between each coat, and the finish just is very nice and durable, and the cleanup is a breeze. You can just run the brush under some warm soapy water and the finish just comes right out of it. Now, I was using a synthetic bristle brush for this project, and like I said, it goes on really well, and I've been very pleased with this product. I think I'll use it for a lot of these types of projects. Now, even though this is shop furniture, I like my shop furniture to be eye appealing, and I like it to be durable. I don't want to see handprints and smudges on everything when your hands are oily or if you have something on them. So putting a couple of coats of finish will help to prevent that. For the dividers, I wanted to put just a good coat of some finishing paste wax on the hardboard dividers. That way the trays will slide in and out very easily, and they shouldn't get all marked up either. And so now it's time to go ahead and start assembling this thing, but I've got a few more mortises to cut and start inserting the dominoes for the glue up. Now, the nice thing about the domino is it makes this glue up process go together fairly quickly. I always try to make sure I don't apply any finish on the glue lines where things are going together, and apply a good amount of glue in each of the mortises and along the edge of the panels. And of course, a nice dead blow mallet like the one I'm using here really helps a project like this go together very smoothly. This is the dead blow mallet that has steel shot in the head of the mallet, and it was designed by Drew Short over at the Rockin' H wood shop. I've been really happy with this mallet, and I'll leave a link to the description, or a link in the description to the build video for that mallet if you'd like to build one yourself. So getting a few clamps on so that I can get to the squeeze out inside the cabinet, and putting one last coat of finish on this thing so that I can get it on the wall. So as I mentioned, I'm really enjoying doing these types of organization projects. So here I'm taking a label machine, and I want to put some labels on the front handle of each of these trays. This way it'll be very easy to identify exactly what's in the tray. And above my workbench I've got some space that really wasn't being utilized, and so I mounted the French cleat on the wall there, and that's where I ultimately hang this cabinet. Just getting it into place and inserting the individual trays. So again, I made it for 6 trays, but I only have 5 at this point. I'll purchase 1.
Okay folks, well, I hadn't planned on this being a one-day build, but as it turned out, it ended up being a one-day build. And this is a project I've really been wanting to do for some time now. I bought these little storage cases at Harbor Freight some time back on a special. Ordered them online. I think I got all 5 of these for about 10 bucks. So they're you know, they snap, the lid snap open. They've got these little bins that come out, different sizes for different parts, storage or things like that. And I recognized right off that I could use them for other things like a rivet gun and different size rivets. So just pop out some of the various bins and just use the ones that you need, and there'll always be a need for the other little compartments. And so just take a label maker and label what you've got on it, and it's quick and easy access. I've had this space here that really wasn't being utilized, and so I thought this would be a good location for it. Gets it up out of the way, easy to spot. It turned out to be a really easy, quick project. I think one that will get a lot of use in my shop, and hopefully one that maybe you can build yourself. You might have an application for it, and I don't really have any plans, but I did do some sketches, and I'll make those available if anyone should like them. So I appreciate you watching. So if you like this project, please give me a thumbs up, and I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel if you're not currently subscribed. Share this project and share my channel with others. That would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching.